heard some very good things that happened yesterday. Before I begin, I want to put a few things in perspective. This might seem like a very long 45 minutes to you, and part of it is really due to me, and that is you may have observed that statisticians have absolutely no sense of humor whatsoever, but we do get along well with management, because you don't either. So. I want to tell a story about what happened to me last winter. I had an opportunity to speak at a series of lectures in which William Ouchi, author of Theory Z and the M-Form Society, also spoke. And he told a story that goes like this. He had the opportunity to speak with a United States Trade Association last winter. And predictably, because the meeting was in winter time, the meeting location was in Miami, Florida. And it was a 3-day meeting. The meeting agenda looked something like this. Ouchi spoke on the morning of the first day, and in the afternoon they had golf scheduled. And they had another speaker in the morning of the second day, and in the afternoon they had deep sea fishing scheduled. And they had another speaker in the morning of the third day, and they had tennis scheduled in the afternoon. So Ouchi gets up there and addresses his audience that morning of the first day, and he says, I've got nothing against golf, fishing, or tennis. I don't doubt of the relationships and the business deals you can make on the golf course. He said, but I want you to think about something as you tee up this afternoon. He had the opportunity to address their direct competitors over in Japan a few months earlier. Their trade association, composed of the 200 or so companies in that particular industry, their trade association meetings started at 8 in the morning and went till 7 at night. They went 6 days a week for 3 months straight, so that they, as an industry comprised of individual companies, large and small, organizations large and small, could duke out their differences so that they, as an industry, could approach their government with one voice, not 200 separate voices trying to get to the trough at the same time, with one voice so that they, as a country, could proceed to dominate any market that they wanted to. Okay. Dr. Deming has said that if you follow his philosophies, you're going to be able to work smarter, not harder. I think in this period of transition, this transition to continuing improvement, we're going to have to do a lot of both, because our competition is. Now, yesterday we had examples of working smarter, not harder on the shop floor. As I understand it, I had seen some of the examples before. They're extremely good and very impressive. But I want to talk to you today about how you, as the management team in Casting Division, can continue to work smarter, not harder. The examples I'm going to talk about are not necessarily on the shop floor. They have to do with the processes that you manage. Now, as Ray Smock also no doubt covered yesterday, you as management have got to take your cue from the company's mission and guiding principles, which, as you know, are based on Dr. Deming's 14 obligations of management. I want to talk about the last guiding principle, one which calls for fostering integrity in our employees. You might take a look at this statement and think it's motherhood. That we've got to say that because we're a corporation. But if you really stop to think about that, if we really do believe that we have to foster and develop the integrity of our employees, then that means that we're going to have to examine the management systems that we have in place to see if they really say that we believe that our employees have integrity. We have got to question every management style, every management system, every operating precedent. We do a lot of things because we've always done them that way. They're not written down. But if you really believe that employees have integrity, that you have integrity, you've got to take a look at the systems you've got in place that say you don't have integrity. We also have a responsibility to take a look at the systems we've got in place that inhibit our company's effort, your individual effort, your division's effort to continually improve. Now I'm going to tell another Ouchi story, which is extremely relevant, and that is that he made the observation that after World War II, two things were happening. One, management was making a transition from management as a right because you were an owner and an operator to management as a profession or management as a science. Secondly, after World War II, you look at industrial capacity anywhere in the world, and it only existed in North America. Everywhere else in the world, it was flattened. Because of that, North America had a virtual monopoly in many industrial areas. And in that monopoly, management carefully learned how to increase profits, how to increase markets, increase sales, if you will. They carefully learned this. Ouchi contends in a monopolistic environment, you could have stood on your heads, or management could have stood on their heads, and sales would have increased, and profits would have increased. And yet management carefully learned how to do all these things. Well, again, Dr. Deming says that we're in a new economic age, and the things that got us to where we are now are not necessarily the systems and the styles and the operating precedents that are going to make us competitive today and in the decades to come. Because now we are in an age of truly international competition, and the stuff that got us to where we are isn't going to be good enough anymore. I'm going to talk about several systems. First, I'm going to talk about those which really state that we're questioning your integrity. Professor Ishikawa was making some comparisons between the systems in the United States and perhaps systems in his country. And he observed that because of some underlying religious connotations, if you will, I don't really want to talk about religion, but when you think about the Judeo-Christian heritage, there's a whole bunch of thou shalt nots and maybe a few thou shalt sprinkled in all over the place. Whereas in the Buddhist culture, there is an underlying feeling that the human spirit is inherently good. We take a look at all of our management systems, and they're structured over a bunch of thou shalt nots. I don't trust you, therefore thou shalt not do this. Don't exceed this per diem rate. Don't exceed this specification. Failure modes and effects analyses. All of our systems are structured on a bunch of thou shalt nots. Pete Jessup will get up and show you how, and the economics of, trying to find out what the customer wants. Structure our things to find out what is good, not necessarily what is not good or what is bad. Now, one of the systems that I want to talk about is our daily production reports. That's an innocuous report, and every organization typically has those. What does that typically show, though? What does that say? Again, any management reporting system can be inherently bad because of the distribution of it, not necessarily because of the report itself, but because of where it goes. You've got a daily production report, which typically goes to God and country. Poor plant manager. No plant manager in his right mind would want to look bad on a daily production report because of where it's sent. So what do you typically see? Plant managers are hoping beyond hope that something goes wrong early in the morning so that they can have a chance to fix it before the end of the day, patch it up or whatever, so that the figures come out at the end of the day. Fostering short-term thinking. For the best of reasons, management through up the line wants that information, but we're fostering some short-term thinking instead of some long-term solutions. What else do we see? Plant manager, and again, these are rational reactions to the systems that we have in place. Or what Dr. Deming is saying is that people are inherently good. They want to take pride in their work. It's not that people are inherently bad. They're rational reactions to the systems. We see plant managers with caches or kitties of production, storing up from good days. They've got a yard or whatever, depending on what you're producing. And it's obvious waste, material waste. You go down the line to the supervisors, and they've got hourly kitties in order to help the plant manager make his daily quota. Again, the focus is on the numbers, not necessarily on the quality of those numbers or the satisfactoriness to your customer of that particular outcome. Some plant managers might have an understanding controller, realizes the head office goes crazy when he sees the numbers go up and down, so they figured out a way to ship them and not bill them, or bill them and not ship them, whatever. Play the games with the paperwork. You get plant managers spending a lot of their creative thinking time thinking up reasons for variances. That's a good pastime. You explain variances. Again, all of these things are reactions to a system we have in place, and all of these kinds of things are short-term thinking, and they foster waste. We can't give our customer what they want at a price they're willing to pay if we're spending our time playing with the system instead of trying to meet our customers' needs. What we've suggested to management is that if they absolutely positively have to have the daily production report, get 5 copies or 6 copies at the end of the week, so that you might see that a plant may have dropped the load or an operation may have dropped the load, but they recovered by the end of the week. It gives them a longer wheelbase from which to recover, from which to plan and take action. We're saying 5 copies and not aggregate it, because someone has to aggregate it. The computer isn't free, the staff work isn't free, the people who have to aggregate it. But more importantly, you as a manager then have the opportunity to coach and counsel your people, and I'll talk about that in a minute. If you look at the data that they use to make their decisions, if you look at aggregate data, you don't have that opportunity. If you look at the data that they use, then you've got the opportunity to say, I see what you were looking at, I might have made a different decision. Which is one innocuous system that, just to make a point, that there are systems all around us that can inhibit our ability to continually improve, as well as state that I don't believe you have integrity. I've seen one company that their plant manager, 23 plants, their plant manager has to personally call in hourly production figures to corporate. It makes no difference that they're a batch, they produce their outcomes in batches, and a batch takes 2 hours. He calls in every hour and makes up a figure in the middle thing just to feed the system. That corporation is saying they don't trust a plant manager for an hour. How can you have integrity? You got the financial management system. Typically needs to be changed. All of these systems that I'm talking about at Ford Motor Company, we're changing them in various degrees. Ford, as you know, with its mission and guiding principles, has made a commitment from the top levels of the company to unfreeze the system, as Jim Bakken says. Absolutely unfreeze the system. That's the exciting and positive message that must be conveyed to all areas of the company. Well, the financial management system typically is too short-term oriented. What did you do for me this quarter? What did you do for me this year? And it doesn't give you the flexibility to trade off resources that only you as local managers know how to do. But nevertheless, the system said that if you miss any one line item, there goes your career. You know, because of fear in the system, I know a lot is changing. Very definitely a lot is changing. But because of fear in the system, that puts a lot of pressure on you. You can't trade off one line item for another. We have an overwhelming preoccupation with labor and overhead. And yet our customer doesn't care what our labor and overhead is. Our customer buys on total cost. You see people playing games. We've got to reduce headcount. So we reduce headcount and then we outsource it, ending up with higher cost. And we're playing games and feeling happy because we reduce overhead, because we reduce our headcount. It's ludicrous. As far as continuing improvement, systems that might inhibit continuing improvement, one of them is, and in fact it's the Kingpin system. I'm just going to talk briefly about it. I must preface this by saying that again, this is a system which some people at Ford have spent the past 18 months now trying to come to agreement so that we can change for the better. And that system is the performance appraisal system. Absolutely is the kingpin of inhibitors, systems which inhibit our ability to continually improve. It's an inhibitor on many accounts, the first one being that it absolutely destroys teamwork. Now, you might be able to get teamwork, but it's in spite of the system and not because of it. And that's because of the way we typically are organized. We're typically organized according to functions. We've got purchasing, we've got manufacturing and engineering and market research and finance, whatever. And high on the list of good things to do, purchasing, high on the list of their good things to do, is lower negotiated cost. Okay, any purchasing department in the world, you get 2 gold stars if you really work at that. Manufacturing, high on their list of good things to do, perhaps is lowering manufacturing cost. Well, right now, manufacturers the world over, or people in production the world over, realize that downtime costs a lot of money. So they'd like to be able to get equipment or tools, whatever, that are the best they can get in order to minimize the downtime. Well, you've just built in, the system says that you just have a win-lose situation now, because right now, if manufacturing or production gets better tools or equipment, some poor buyer ain't going to meet his or her objective of lowering negotiated costs, because right now better tools and equipment cost more. Maybe in some years they'll cost less, but right now they cost more. Now, we might get some cooperation because you know, we've grown up in the company. We've been here the past 30 years or so. I might owe you something. But I want you to remember, when push comes to shove, my bonus, my security, my career depends on me meeting my objectives, not you meeting yours. And again, that's a rational reaction to the system that we've got in place. All bets are off when it means that I'm not going to meet my objective. All bets might be off if we're in a situation where I might not exceed my objective. You get more gold points for exceeding objectives. Again, in spite of our best wishes that we've got teamwork between departments, between divisions, between companies, suppliers and whatever, the systems force us the other way. They reduce initiative. The objective system is a negotiated process. Some people negotiate more than others, depending on your level. You either say, yes, I'll shut up and fly wing, or you can argue about it. But if it's negotiated, your boss wants a high one, and you might want a lower one because you know your career's at stake if you don't meet that objective. Now, again, I have to bear with me. I deal in overstatement to make a point. But I think the point is an important one. Because it's negotiated, because of fear of failure, you're going to end up with some mediocre objectives. You're going to end up with something that reduces initiative, reduces stretch. Got another way of putting it, you might see, you might know, for instance, that this year you could save 8%. You absolutely know you've got ways of saving 8%. And yet the company, year after year, you know the task this year or whatever is 5%. And you know next year it'll be about the same, 5% or a little, maybe a little more. What does the company see at the end of this year? The company sees 5%, maybe 5.1 because you exceeded your objective. But what are you doing? You're playing with the system. You don't trust the system enough to give it the full 8% because you don't know where in the hell you're going to get the extra 3 to 2% next year. So you're saving it. You're banking it, playing funnies with the figures. And that, obviously, is waste. You can't compete in world markets if you've got people playing the system instead of trying to meet customers' needs. And that's our responsibility as management, to restructure the system so that it supports continuing improvement and not necessarily inhibits it. I call that typically an Alexiev mentality. You may recall that Vasily Alexiev was a Russian super heavyweight weightlifter. And he was paid a stipend for every world record that he broke. He wasn't a dumb person, he broke a lot of world records. But he did it a gram at a time. Okay. We've got systems in place that are fostering you to set a nice easy objective and step over it and collect your gold star and then set another one. And some companies purposely do that because they want you to feel that you're a winner. Everyone wants everyone to feel like they're a winner. But it's only worked where you've got some predominance in a particular marketplace. It can only work, well, I don't know if it really can, because you're mortgaging some form of complacency for the future. And our company's intent is to be better than we were last year. Continually improve. One of the things we see as well is they don't distinguish between the people and the rest of the system. I guess I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of management, both in government and industry, and some of them relate to me stories that go like this, that one time while they were a plant manager or a division manager or a government equivalent, department head, nothing went wrong. I don't want to say everything went right, but in effect nothing went wrong on their watch, and they were proceeded to be promoted to the next level. Next person who came into that position, God love him, fantastic individual, but unfortunately something went wrong on his watch, and he's no longer with us now. There's a recognition that many times the system, the momentum of the system, as you know, a system or a process is comprised of five kinds of resources: people, materials, methods, machines, and environment, all blending together to produce an outcome. And yet the singular focus is typically on the people. Many times the system, the momentum of the system, far overshadows the best of your abilities and the lack or the worst of your abilities. I often use the quote, a couple of years ago, the Detroit News ran an article on General Motors for their 75th birthday or anniversary. And one of the articles, they were mentioning Richard Gerstenberg's quote when he was chairman of General Motors. And he stated that as chairman of General Motors, he felt that he was like an ant riding on top of a log, and that log was going down the rapids. And he could see a treacherous bend in the river. And as chairman of General Motors, the most powerful industrial figure in the world, all he could do to change the course of General Motors is to stick his foot in the water and yell, "Whoa, you son of a bitch, whoa." That's what he's quoted as saying. Many times it's not enough for management to get the vision of where the corporation or company should go, the organization should go. They've got to, policy statements, mission statements are easy, talk's cheap. You've got to provide a roadmap in which to get to where you want to go. It's not enough to have a vision. It's not enough to see far enough ahead that something's going to happen. You've got to be able to manage the rest of the organization. You've got to be able to get the rest of the organization to follow that vision. And that's what we're trying to do in developing and further developing the guiding principles to explain the mission, the core values to explain the mission. We've got to live those daily. Another important reason that traditional performance appraisal systems are an inhibitor is that they increase the variability of performance. Now I've got to give you some background. These systems, by the way, one of the things Dr. Deming has said is that management doesn't even know what questions to ask. And we don't know what questions to ask because we don't understand the reality of variability. Understanding the reality of variability on the shop floor is one thing. I think we all can relate to that. But understanding the variability in the processes that we manage as management is quite another thing. This is where understanding of, you can't change the system as well unless you understand variability. You can change it, but you can't change it for the better. A lot of these systems, unless you understand some statistical thinking, they increase the variability of performance. Why? Well, one of the underlying assumptions in a performance appraisal system is that you've got pigeonholes for every possible area of performance. We feel that people want to know exactly where they're placed. Another reason for this numerous pigeonholes is that top management wants to be able to really distinguish between the top performers and the bottom performers. So you see rating systems that are similar to that. Go from outstanding high down to unsatisfactory. There's also another underlying assumption, and that is that you're going to plus those above average and minus those below average. You're going to take the top 10% or 1% and really reward them, and you're going to take it from the bottom 10% or 1% because everyone knows below average is bad. Well, and I don't want to bring up another problem, but below average in Ford Motor Company now is outstanding because of another problem, and that is management really has not come to grips with honestly and openly communicating with their people to try and develop them. And that's a fact. Actually, our below average is excellent high. That's what, if you're excellent high, you're below average. And that's using company-wide data. Okay, so that, if you're below average, okay, that can be devastating. If you're below average, you might try and figure out how to get above average, and try to emulate those folks above average. Well, if you do, you're not looking at a sufficiently differentiating stimuli, if you will, and you're going to end up over-controlling because you're responding to readings and to guidance that, or you might be responding to guidance that isn't necessarily sufficiently different so that you really can learn and do better. So the principle of over-control, as we know it applies in the shop floor, applies here as well. We also see that well, I guess before I do that, I guess it's obvious that, you know, in any group of 10 people, one's going to be in the top 10% and one will be in the bottom 10%, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. You know that before you start. About half will be above average, about half will be below average. Now I know technically it's the median, but, you know, if it's high in the middle and low in the ends, it's about right. You know that before you start. Deming tells a story of the newspaper article after the war in London. Said that there was a national disgrace, that half of the children in England were below average in nutrition, and something had to be done about it. Perfectly unacceptable. You knew that before you started. You knew that before you collected any data. And yet we've structured, I guess the folks in sales are particularly sensitive to it. We've got some zone managers with, Dr. Deming has seen some zone managers with 3 dealers, and one of them's below average. Great guy, but we can't accept anyone below average, and going to have to force him to sell his business. Any system, you're going to have some above average and you're going to have some below average. You can't do a darn thing about it. The same system that generated the top 10% generated the bottom 10%. It's all a blending of people, materials, methods, environment. Now, if you're outside of the system, that's some sufficient differentiation, outside on either the high or the low side. You know, we also add variability. Actually, we add variability because we manage by exception. If you think of what Dr. Deming is saying, management by exception really goes out the window, because the exception are special causes. Your people should be able to address the special causes, typically. You need to be working on the system, to change the system. Well, in any event, because we manage by exception, that means that that you don't have too much opportunity, as the human relations people say, to give positive strokes, because exceptions are problems. You don't say, when someone walks in with a problem, hey, great job or whatever, I want to give you some positive strokes. It's just not the opportunity to do it. So the human relations people are saying, well, you've got to, every opportunity, you've got to give positive strokes. You've got to give people feedback. If you don't understand the difference between special causes and common causes, you're going to be yo-yoing people up and down and increasing the variability. So you've got to understand that before you can take some of that counsel. I guess you also have waste because people below average, again, thinking that something must be wrong, not realizing that there are going to be people below average, and there'll be people above average are devastated. Absolutely devastated, and their lack of productivity for that period of time after they find out that they're below average. If we got a system that specifically tells them they're below average, they're going to be devastated and not able to work to the way they could be. You're going, and you have gone through a process of, as I understand, in the breakout rooms, going through the process of establishing a 5-year plan. I want to talk about, we'll give you one brief example of what you need to be looking at as you go through this process, because continuing improvement, you're going to get continuing improvement in the long run if you pay attention to the method that you use, not necessarily the number. You give me any number. A lot of people approach it when we see continuing improvement. We say, okay, that means I want to improve. I want to be here next year and maybe there the following year. And given any number in that relatively short period of time, I can back into it, okay? Which means that my emphasis is on the outcome and not necessarily on the process. Okay, if the emphasis is on the outcome, no matter what the outcome it is, we know that that's a high-cost way of doing business. You've got to go further upstream in the process if you're going to be effective. Okay.
Just talking to it, Bill.
Fine, thank you. What we need to be looking at, again, looking at the data. If the data shows, let's say this is that's relatively in focus, isn't it? Yeah, good enough. Okay, if the data historically has been here, and let's say we've been going like that, a lot of people see a trend there. But let's see. Let's say the data was like that, and you as management have determined you got to be there next year, and maybe there the following year. But let's concentrate on that. In previous years, what have we done? You've either signed up for it, or you work somewhere else, or whatever. I'm not arguing whether management can be arbitrary or informed, whatever. You might know that, as Gerstenberg saw, that bend in the river, that unless you're there, you're out of business. It's got nothing to do with how you came up with that point. What you've got to do to analyze it, if that's been the performance year over year, the control, and you calculate to see if you've got a system, and the system and this point is outside of the system, what should that tell you as management? That should say that you have no chance in hell of making that unless you change the system. Okay? Now, if the data showed that that were part of that, then you've got some chance in hell of making it. But the emphasis has got to be on, is it part of the system or not? And whoever establishes that has got to, if it's outside the system, has got to be able to change the system, to change the blending of resources. Otherwise, we're going to be spending the next period of time figuring out real good reasons why we didn't make it. I just wanted to leave that perspective. The emphasis has to be upstream, as it does on any process. If you're managing this, you say, okay, that, and we say, as I said earlier, you give me any number and I'll back into it. That's not the approach you need to take. You need to take the approach of going further upstream and planning for improvement, and that's where the emphasis should be, and the outcomes will follow. I want to say that we just had the opportunity to touch on a few of the systems that you as management need to consider as you manage the business. I must say that in my talkings and dealings with you, in our support of your endeavor, I'm extremely impressed with what you've been able to do. I think your customer focus is extremely laudable, and the efforts that you're making are starting and beginning to pay dividends. You know, every division in the company, every organization in the company has their strengths and weaknesses, and all of them are, as I go around, I'm typically asked, well, how are we doing vis-a-vis other folk? And I never answer the question because you're all different. But from what I see in this division, you've got a very good, you're very well on the road. And I commend that, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes. Now, Pete is going to talk about, I'm not going to introduce you, I guess Tom's going to introduce you. But Pete is going to talk about another system that really is a result of some superstitious learning in the manufacturing area. And I'm going to ask you to keep an open mind on that. There are a lot of things that we think we know that there are different perspectives on. And this is going to put some meat on the economics of continuing improvement. We're not doing it because we're altruistic, we're doing it because we're businessmen.